For our Cosm Cafe series today, we have Dr. Ajani Ross, Journeys, which is classes to co-ops. Dr. Ajani Ross is the Director of Internships and Co-ops for the College of Science and Math at Wright State University. He is also an instructor for the Department of Physics, where he worked with universities to design and develop online material for Physics 1060, an introductory astronomy course. After earning his BS in physics at Wright State University, he pursued his Masters and Ph.D. from the University of Texas in Arlington, Texas. While there, his research interest was in the area of thin magnetic materials and characterizations of magnetic properties and materials. So if we would give a nice round of applause for Dr. Ajani Ross.
Hi, how's everyone doing? First and foremost, I just want to apologize. I'm probably going to talk with my mouth closed a lot because they pulled my wisdom teeth out a couple of days ago, so it kind of hurts to talk. But as she said, I'm Johnny Ross. I'm a physics instructor here at Wright State. I graduated from here. I'll talk a little bit about my story here as an undergraduate and as a graduate student. But just some of the things I want to cover with you today is how your journey as an undergraduate, possibly graduate student, or I guess a lot of you are in the pursuing medical type degree, how all the things that you learn, even though they might not be related to what you think you'll need, little things are important. So I'll go over my student experience, my work experience as a student, as an undergraduate student, and even after I graduated. Some of the things I learned from working in these various fields, and even my time as a student. How just the overall experience that you have, like even here at Wright State, things that you pick up on a daily basis, interactions with colleagues, interactions with your classes, with friends, and so on and so forth, can help you gain knowledge that you can use in your careers. You never know what you might need, so it's always best to kind of try to pick up as much as you can. And then the last part of it is pretty much what I'm mostly here to talk to you about is internships, what they are, how you can get one, and steps that you should be thinking about during your time here now as a student. So from 2003 to 2007, I was a student here. And the first couple of years, I actually was an electrical engineering major. I wasn't originally a physics major, but in my third, or roughly like halfway through my sophomore year, I decided to switch to physics. And there's a whole story behind that, but I won't waste your time with it. If you have questions about it, you can ask me later. And along with that, I don't want to just stay here and talk to you the whole time. I will, but if you have questions, feel free to interrupt me anytime. But in the spring of 2007, I graduated from Wright State with a bachelor's degree in physics. And then that fall, like 2 months later, I began graduate school, as she said, at the University of Texas Arlington in Arlington, Texas. My concentration was still physics, with an emphasis on magnetic properties of thin films. Now, I didn't start out that way. I actually originally was doing work with quantum dots, quantum nanoparticles, that kind of thing, and how you can use them to produce artificial light, like lighting fixtures and that kind of thing. But during my time as a graduate student, you spend lots of time studying, reading about your research, reading about things that you need to know in class, things that you might not have thought that you needed to know, but suddenly there's a need for you to know it. And now, part of my field of study, being physics, it wasn't just physics that I needed to know in order to complete my work. I actually had to incorporate a lot of things that I maybe learned once or twice as an undergraduate student, but then decided, well, I don't really need to know this, so I'm not going to really practice it. And then all of a sudden, one day you have to know how to do it, and you have to reteach yourself. So as a graduate student, or even when you go into like your professional career type classes, you'll find that it more so becomes about how well you are self-taught, like the initiative to pick up books that you need to read, ask your professors for help, ask people who are in the profession for help, and so on and so forth. But one of the things that happens in the case of like being an experimentalist, so my area of physics was very experiment-based, not so much theoretical, but being an experimentalist often involves being a technician. So what that means is, so you're working in the lab, nothing ever works. Like you buy a brand new piece of equipment, has a manual, never been turned on before, you turn it on, do exactly what the manual says, and it doesn't work. Well, you can either call the technician to have them come out, they'll charge you like $10,000 a day, seriously, to fix this object. Or, let's say something specific about this doesn't work, where you need to have this thing working in a particular manner. Well, one of the things that ends up happening is, well, being a technician, self-made technician, you have to fix things that are broken, or sometimes you need to make something that's not directly sold by a manufacturer. So usually this calls for doing your own repairs or improvising solutions. And again, I'm presenting this as a means of what happened to me. And this is not necessarily what's going to happen to you, but these kind of little bits and pieces of what I had to do to get things to work, it kind of goes hand in hand with this self-education idea that will help you in your careers in the future. So this experience with tools, the ability to self-teach, gave me these opportunities to deal with problems as they occurred in the lab. I didn't have to wait around for a solution to occur. But then I later learned that this intermittent tinkering around, so like taking things apart, fixing things, seeing how things work, why they weren't working, it gradually increased my skill set. So the same thing likely would happen to you. So for instance, you guys have to do like clinicals and that kind of thing in medical school, where you go around, maybe shadow a doctor or something like that. You get experience with like little bits and pieces at a time, but then these little steps build to this great wealth of knowledge that can help you in future employment opportunities. So one of the things in particular that you run into, and again, this is what I had to do, not necessarily what you like to do, but programming and electronic hardware. So a lot of the things I had to interface with, software and hardware, to get my experiments to work. And a lot of times exactly what I needed wasn't available. So you kind of have to build it from scratch. So like I said, there were some things that I learned as an undergraduate that I kind of just took for granted. It's like, oh, okay, I got an A in the class and I don't really need to know anymore. But then 3 years down the road, this comes up again. It's like, oh, someone wrote this MATLAB code and I don't know what any of this stuff means. Or someone wrote this Mathematica code and I don't know how to run it. Things like that. So then you have to revisit it. But this whole time, you're up here at one particular point, and then you stop studying, and then it drops. And then you have to learn a little bit more, and you come back up, and then you stop, and it drops even more. So to get back to where you were, it's usually very hard. So one of the things that I like to tell undergraduate students, which they often don't believe me, is that you have more knowledge by the time you graduate with a bachelor's degree than by the time you go to graduate school. And the reason for that is because you're constantly reading, constantly studying, constantly doing homework, so you're constantly practicing. But then what happens when you go into like your graduate studies or even the more professional world, this is nothing against people who are professionals. I'd be denigrating myself if I said this, I meant it. When you start to become more specialized, all of those skill sets that you had, they start to become more concentrated. So then whenever you need to pull from that thing that you used to know how to do, well, now I don't know how to do it anymore. So this is where I'm kind of getting at with, like, you want to practice as much as possible and have as much experience with as many things as you can, as often as you can. So there's a kind of interesting story about, like, I put this slide up here for a reason. Because this actually wasn't the lab that I was working in, but it was the exact same piece of equipment. During my last year as a graduate student, I was trying to get my experiment to work so I can collect my data and write the dissertation and so on and so forth. And this device, actually, this mouse will show up. This device right here, so this little box with the black covering on it, stopped working. Now that's the main control for this whole thing. It's what sets the power, sets the magnetic field, and so on and so forth, collects the measurements and everything. Well, it stopped working. The computer that originally controlled it was from 1995, was running Windows 95, and used the 3.5, it had a 3.5 floppy bay and a 5 1/4, I think, or 5-inch floppy disk drive, no CD-ROM, no USB. So the problem was, okay, this thing stopped working, but I need this device to take my measurements. So what I had to do was go through, dig through the manuals, and try to figure out, well, how does this piece of equipment actually send the information to the power supply? How does it read the magnetic moment? How does it set the field, and so on and so forth? So then what I had to do was basically re-engineer this whole thing, because it came down to, well, you can wait 6 months and have the manufacturer send you the newly updated one that costs $60,000. Or you can build a cheap circuit that literally costs $5, spend some time writing a program, and then have this thing do what it did originally. Now, granted, that took an entire summer. It took me about 4 months to get this thing working to the point where I could actually measure some stuff with it. But the point being is the amounts, it's not how much time it took, it's how much you learned from the experience. So revisiting circuits, revisiting programming, and all of this kind of stuff. If I didn't have to revisit all that stuff, if I had kept up with it, then all of this information I would have been able to use immediately, and it probably would have taken a month rather than an entire summer. So again, this concept of constantly keeping up with this practice. So in doing so, I was actually able to, this is some of the, I pulled some of this from my PhD dissertation, some of the information that I was able to extract from the machine. So on the right here, this graph was the information, the dots are the actual measurements that you get from the machine that are fed into the computer. The computer then runs an algorithm that I wrote. It's like a differential equation solver, in which it takes this function, fits it to these data points, and solves, and comes back and tells you certain parameters associated with the magnetic properties of the material. So how strong of a magnet is it? What kind of field is required to fully magnetize this thing, demagnetize it, and so on and so forth. So then in full detail, you look at this over various temperature ranges, and you can actually see the temperatures at which the magnetic properties of the material change. But all of this was done through a combination of LabVIEW, MATLAB, Mathematica, designs with circuits, and a few other things within mind. But the thing about this is, I didn't really have the opportunity to just sit down and say, well, how do I do this? This is where the self-teaching aspect comes in. You have to have the drive and the ambition to go forth and say, okay, I really need to do this, and I can't wait around for someone else to do it for me. But that doesn't mean that you can't seek advice and seek help from other people. This, oh, great, okay. Okay, all right, so after graduation, so dissertation done, got the PhD finished. But after graduation, I spent about 2 years as a research scientist for an HVAC company, so heating, ventilation, air conditioning company, testing various air handling products, and that's actually the company that I used to work for, Kruger HVAC. And one of the things that they made, actually they're in this room, I don't know if they specifically made them, but these little square, they're called diffuser plates, and they help circulate the air in the room. So what was done, or what my job was, let's say Wright State was building in a room like this, and let's say they were building this room. They know from the architect that they're regularly going to hold meetings in this room, and let's say the capacity is probably like 20-some people, and they know the dimensions of the room, they know how much glass is in the room, and so on and so forth. So you get aspects of like heat transfer, sound, and so on and so forth. So then the architect will come in and say, okay, I need to keep this room at a constant 70 degrees for the number of people that are going to be in here, but I want to keep the sound below a certain level. I want to keep energy costs down, so that means the rooftop units, I don't want them constantly running. So then they will test. They will purchase one of these diffusers, they would send it to our lab. We'd set it up in a room that had some of the parameters similar to this room. It would have microphones, it would have air velocity meters, it would have temperature meters, humidity, so on and so forth. And you would monitor the outputs of one of these diffusers. And then you'd send that data back to the architect. The architect would send that to the contractor and say, okay, I need so many of these in this room spaced a certain distance apart. So anytime, and one of the things that happens after working for this company, and maybe you'll start doing this just by habit once I mention it, is one of the things that happens is a lot of times when people install these, they do it incorrectly. So if you've ever been in a restaurant and you sit in a booth and you're like freezing to death, and the person sitting right next to you is burning up, it's because they weren't installed correctly. So the idea is, and the concept that a lot of people have when this stuff isn't tested, and this is one of the reasons why this company was so sought after, is because they tested this every single time someone wanted to buy one. They would make a room that was similar to what they wanted to buy. So you didn't want to just, okay, I want 70 degrees in here, so I'm going to pump 40-degree air into this room, and eventually it'll circulate. Well, what ends up happening is the cold air will sink to the bottom, and people who are sitting directly below the vents, they will freeze, and people sitting right next to them, they won't. So one of the things that we had that was actually like a big show for customers as they came in, is we had this industrial strength cold, they call it a cold wall. And on this wall, you could set a temperature as high as like 150 degrees or as low as like minus 32. And you would put, at the top here, so just really quick, you would put the particular thing that someone was thinking about buying. So these are linear slot diffusers, so they're just like these, except they only blow in one direction. And what they would do to simulate like an office building in Alaska or something, they drop the temperature on the other side of this wall to like minus 15. And then you blow air towards this wall. Due to the fact that the temperature in the room is higher than the temperature on this wall, it would be pulled towards the wall. It flows down the wall, and then you can actually see this stuff circulate throughout the room. So one of the ways that they can cool the room without having to have a bunch of these all over the place. So then that cuts down on your energy use. Just to give you an idea of some of the things that they do. So as part of my responsibility, I actually helped design the automation systems where you just walk around with an iPad and we have these various different diffusers that people can test. You just press the button and the system runs. So that's again where this experience with some of the stuff that I learned as an undergraduate and graduate came in and helped in the professional world. So now after graduation and working in this particular company, so one of my direct supervisors was machinist, is very hardware specific, hands-on kind of guy. So I learned from working in that company how to use various different materials. I learned how to precision measuring instruments, micrometer calipers, how to design my own enclosures for things, properly use voltmeters to test for voltages, design cables. I learned how to weld a little bit. So all these little bits and pieces of things that you learn, they build up to something greater in the future because it makes you more employable because you have that vast skill set. So a lot of these things I still use today. And really, it's always something. Always something. Sorry about that. Okay, so where was I going with all this? So all of this work experience as a graduate student, undergraduate student, research scientist working for the company helped me develop this long list of applicable skills for my current position. So current position as either the instructor or director of internships and co-ops. And the reason for this is because students, they come to me and they may ask a specific question. Well, through that knowledge base that I have, I'm more able to help them or at least guide them in a path that would allow them to get a result sooner instead of having this runabout conversation of, well, I don't really know, you might need to go talk to this person, if that person doesn't know, go talk to this person, and so on and so forth. So the direction is more direct. And that's one of the things that fortunately you guys have that I didn't have when I was a student here. When I was a student here, they didn't have these kinds of things. They didn't have these kind of talks in which someone, not necessarily who was in your field, but someone would come by and say, okay, these are the things that you should be looking at right now if you are interested in doing this. So that guided, or like this guided series in which none of this stuff may apply to you, but you at least have an idea that if I want to do something like this, these are the kinds of things that would help me. But a lot of the students that I work with within the physics department have senior project ideas, so physics students, as well as some of the other students in college science math, are required to do senior projects. So when they come to me and they say, okay, well, I would like to do this, or I have an idea about this, but I'm not quite sure how to pursue it. That knowledge base helps direct this conversation to a fairly good or very good senior project design. So this is actually kind of like a schematic of one of the things that one of my senior project students is doing right now, which we could talk about some other time if you had questions. So, how do you get as much experience as possible early in your career? So early in your career is like right now. So one of the first things is you want to have guided experience that will help shape your career goals. So coming to things like this, talking with advisors, talking with people who are in your ideal career path. But at the same time, you want to have experience, you want to experience and have as many avenues of knowledge as you possibly can, because you never know what might come handy in the future. One of the things that, again, I'm not trying to put anyone down, but one of the things that always happens with undergraduates, especially when you have to take like these general education courses, is you're like, well, I'm never going to need that because I'm doing this. Well, you might be surprised, and it's one of the things that often happens. Some of the things that you do now that you think, oh, I'll never need that in the future because I'm going to be X, Y, or Z. Well, you never know that 10 years down the road, that thing that you put off now or didn't take too seriously is actually a very key aspect of something that you might need in your chosen career. So, this brings, all of this stuff is culminating into this concept of these internships. Like, what are internships, how do I get one, and so on and so forth. So internships in basically, they generally consist of an exchange of services, so work services for experience between students such as yourself, an organization or company, or sometimes even a university. Sometimes there are internships within the university. Some are unpaid, some are paid, some are unpaid, but then they have the benefit, the added benefit of like college credit. Some are paid, and that's just it. Whether paid or unpaid, that's one of the things that, again, students don't always appreciate this at first. But one of the benefits of being paid or unpaid, even if it's unpaid, there's still a benefit. Just because you don't receive any payment, that doesn't mean that it's a bad experience. Now, there are two sides to every coin, but in the case of work experience and knowledge gain, that's what you're really after. So the same thing is true even in like your courses. You're graded in your courses, you think, oh, well, I got a D, I wanted an A. But did you get a D and learn a lot, or did you get an A and not learn anything? You gotta kind of have to take the good with the bad. You can use an internship, this is one of the big ones, you can use an internship to gain, as an opportunity to determine if you actually have an interest in that particular field or career path. Because, like again, you may have an idea of what you want to do, but then when you actually start doing it, you may realize that this is really not what you want to do. So an internship is a good way to kind of like test the waters, because there's no real consequence if you just say that, okay, I thought I wanted to do this, but then I decided that I don't want to. Another big aspect of doing the internships is you gain contacts, and networking skills. So building up your Rolodex, people still use those, in terms of people that you know to help you get into certain career paths. And as like I said, you can gain school credit. So some of the programs within the College of Science and Math actually have internship courses in which you can take an internship usually over the summer, and it counts towards credit, towards your degree. I know in particular Environmental Health and Science has one course like that. But some of the biggest benefits of doing the internships is after you have done an internship, or let's say you do one over the summer and maybe you do one every summer from now to the point that you graduate, once you complete your coursework, usually a lot of times the interns who work wherever they work, once they graduated, they are almost immediately able to be hired by that company that they did an internship with. And that's because you already know the people you're working with, you've already proven yourself as a good worker, and you've already got the experience by the time you graduate. And now you have the degree to certify that you are a competent person in this area. And having worked at that company in that program, that work experience, that training, it puts your resume at the top of the list. almost to the point where you don't even have to apply. They just say, okay, you graduated, would you like a job here? Which has happened before. I actually know quite a few people that I went to school with here, did an internship at the Air Force Base. Almost as soon as they walked off stage from graduation, they were hired at the Air Force Base. They were given a job because they had all of that experience. Now, when it comes down to it, first step is, okay, if I have an internship, well, how do I find one? Well, there are internship programs available within the College of Math and Science. There are also internships within the other colleges on campus. But one of the things that you want to look at specifically, or these few things that you want to look at specifically, is you got to first figure out what you want to do. Now, it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to be that, okay, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, and I make the choice, I'm going to stick with it. You just have to have an idea. Once you have that idea, you want to register for the Career Services website, and I will go through some of the basics on how you do that and what the purpose of doing that is. Who should you talk to? Getting ready, once you figure out who you talk to, what you want to do, getting ready to do the search for internships. So like actually going out and trying to find one. Some of the final steps, once you found an internship, and then once you have it, so you got an internship, and now what do you do? So, what do you want to do? Well, if you had asked me this question when I was an undergraduate student, I would have said, I don't know. But I didn't really have an idea. But some of you might already. And again, one of the things I mentioned is that one of the reasons why I wasn't too sure what I wanted to do is because I didn't really have someone saying that, okay, if this is your current intended degree path, these are some of the things that are available to you. Which, coming to things like this, you'll meet people that might have better explanations for you than what I got as an undergraduate student. So one of the easiest things to do is talk with your faculty advisor, talk with upper level students, talk with people in your field that you are interested in. One of the big things, especially at a place like Wright State, because it's a research institution, is try to shadow a graduate student or professor if they're doing research or work in the area that you want to possibly do. And as always, ideally someone in your desired field. So a lot of the labs on campus, from a lot of the people that I've met, they're usually pretty friendly about you coming in and asking questions. And they really like to see undergraduates who are showing interest in doing research. So if you're in like your chemistry classes, biology classes, or so on, even physics classes, and you say, okay, I'm really interested in what some of the certain aspects of the things that I'm learning are, who would I go talk to? Well, go talk to your professors. They'll be your first in, and then they can introduce you to some of the graduate students if they have it. The next step is kind of after you've got an idea of what you want to do, is you want to register for full access to the Career Services student site. So this site, hopefully it'll open. Yes. So this, it's going to freeze, isn't it? It's going to, great. Oh, okay. So this site, what it'll do is it'll take you to a web portal in which you will have, like these first two options are the ones that you want to focus on. Student employment job postings, so these are things that just like randomly pop up either through around the university or locally. And then the next one, this full access career center login, that's the one that you want to look at. Because what that one's going to allow you to do is create a profile, view job postings, post a resume, see current status in terms of your employment, and so on and so forth. So I'll actually show you a quick overview as to what that page looks like. So once you log in, it kind of looks like this. So once you create your login and password, it's going to bring you to a place like this, where on the left-hand side in that green area, you have your 24-hour access to like view all current job postings. You can go upload a resume, view your resume, view employers who have looked at your resume, send information to employers, so they will particularly have contact information in human resources or something like that. You can send out messages to them, and then they will have these news feeds that, like over here on the right, they have this Indeed news feed that constantly just updates job postings based off of the keywords that you give it when you sign up for your career services page. once you have that, you've logged in, you've created your profile. And the reason why I put that kind of near the top is because when you upload your resume, it has to be checked before it's officially viewable by employers. So that can take a while. So you want to kind of get that started as early as possible. But also the reason why you want to get in there first is because when you write your resume, you don't just want to put something up there. Because I was able to actually log back into my student profile, because I guess they never get rid of it, and I saw my resume from 2005. Horrible. Like, absolutely atrocious compared to like what my resume looks like now. And again, that's because I didn't have the information to go and say, okay, talk to this person and have them look at your resume before you put it up there. So we kind of just went through this about what your career services student login page will look like. But now, who do you talk to? And where should you talk to? So determine those people who you would benefit from meeting. So what I mean by that is, let's just say that you want to be a doctor. You want to be a doctor, and you know someone within the biology department, chemistry department, physics department, whatever, who knows an actual doctor. You want to get to that person because that person is going to be able to tell you, these are the things that employers are looking for on resumes. These are key things that a doctor, like class-wise or experience-wise, should have by the time they graduate, things like that. But these are kind of determined by talking with those who are currently working in your desired field path. So you kind of want to narrow, once you decide, okay, I want to do, this is my field of focus, I want to do this. But now you say, okay, I need to talk to a particular person, your focus narrows. And the more it narrows, eventually you get to the point where you're directed, okay, this is where I need to go, this is what I need to do, this is who I need to talk to. So you'll want to seek out and meet these people as soon as possible to get an early start on your career path. So usually by the time you're in your sophomore year, because by that time you've most likely chosen a major and you are starting to do some of your major coursework. So once you've identified those important role models, you need to prepare for eventual interviews. So what this means is getting your resume ready and your interview skills in order. So there are some services on campus that will help with your resume writing and also things like mock interviews. I would suggest, because this is one of the things that I did, it is somewhat expensive. It may not be the correct route to go for an internship, but if you are really looking for something when you graduate, use a professional resume writing service. Now, what they will not do is tailor your resume for a specific career field, but what they will do is put the correct wording in there, the format of the document, they'll put it on really nice paper and all of this kind of stuff. And usually within a certain number of years, you can send as many submission updates as you want, and they'll update it for free. But the initial cost is usually pretty high, like it's a couple $100. But it's worth it for like after you graduate. But if you have that information, then you can just directly tell them, okay, this is the kind of thing that I want, and they'll write it up for you. And they can spell check and grammar and everything like that for you. So in addition to your campus resources, one of the other big things that you want to do is you want to have your advisors or your mentors look over your resume and talk to them about the interview process. And the reason for this is because, again, these are the people who work in the field that you want to work in. So they know what employers are looking for. So that's why you want to talk to them before you just throw this thing out there and then just to be overlooked because it's not, you're not talking to the people with the correct language that you need to be speaking with. So that's more to get you in tune with the areas of employment that you're seeking. So one of the final steps, so once you talk with the advisors, you have a good resume, you've done a few mock interviews, so you feel good about being asked questions and answering questions. Now you're looking at, okay, well, where do I want to work? And this final step is actually a little bit easier because when you're talking with these mentors and advisors, they kind of tell you, hey, you should probably be looking at this place. So that first point is a little bit easier once you've got all this other stuff out of the way. Another thing that we kind of suggest that you do once you have your internship picked out and you've gone through the interview process is register for the CPE course. So if you decide to do this, you send me an email because I'm the person who would register you for this course. But what this does is it gives the university, as well as your faculty advisor, if you're an undergraduate, and even if you're a graduate student here at Wright State, as a working record of your internship position and your experience. So you do this every semester, and like halfway through the semester and at the end of the semester, you write kind of like a summary of what you've done and like an exit interview at the end. But this is a 0 credit hour course. It's just designed to keep your faculty advisors and the university appraised of the current working positions of their students, so that they can get information about, okay, what are students doing in biology? What's the kind of fields that they're going into nowadays? To better help the next generation of students that are coming up. But as always, your faculty advisors and your mentors can help you identify the right people and places to get your information out. And then once all this stuff is done, you start working and you start gaining your experience in your internship. So, with all that, because we're, I guess, almost out of time. Yeah. Actually, it ended quite nicely. Are there any questions about anything I talked about or anything specific to the internship program? Yes.
What's CPD stand for?
It's a good question. I don't remember. If you had asked me yesterday, I probably would have been able to tell you. Then you put me on the spot. I don't remember. I can also do it.
How often can you do internships? Do you stay like each semester or each year? Is it something different? Or?
It depends. Some companies usually will only offer summer internships. Some will do like by semester basis. A lot of it kind of depends on funding, because some of these internships, like I said, are paid, and the ones that are paid, they will usually do this as often as they can, depending on how many students sign up for the internship and how much money they have on hand. There are some programs at the state level that try to offset that to help employers hire more students. So the state will actually give the employers a certain amount of money to employ more students, but then that comes down to, does the state have the funding? And if they don't, then it's all on the employer. Any other? Okay. Well, thanks for listening to my talk.
Let's give another round of applause to Dr. Ajani to come and tell us we really appreciate these opportunities. Like he said, it kind of makes me feel good, because things that I've said in my class and to my students is pretty much reiterated across the board, regardless of what major, regardless of what part of the university you're in. So very good information. Hopefully you guys will take that to heed. He did show you exactly where to go for the internships. If there is any information that you have, you can find, if you search in our directories, you'll be able to find Dr. Ajani's information and to email him if you do have any additional questions.